what makes this pack so special? Let me give you a deep dive into some of its very unique features. Okay, first off, some of you may know, may recognize this. This is a Mchale. Mchales have long been known for being an absolute top tier, relatively custom pack. They aren't without their detractors though. There are some people that say it's old school 90s, it's this, it's that. However, there are features in this pack that very few packs have, and there's also features in this pack that are currently in some of the other packs since the patents have ran out, or they've been adopted and slightly changed. So first off, let's get into this. This is a 90s Mchale. This is the sit pad. It Velcros on here. It's okay, nice to have. It is nice to have to sit up, but we're going to remove this for function of this talk. The framing of this pack is a relatively beefy 70-75 aluminum, which has a tremendous yield strength. See how it snaps back to its shape from that? I believe this is 1 inch here. It ties directly into these grommets on the belt. So this belt articulates forward, and the very top of the pack is anchored to the load lifters here. What does that create? That creates an extremely direct load transfer. Your load is up here, your load is here, loaded onto the belt. That's it. As we discussed, we'll get into the framing a touch more in a second. As we discussed, the belt is what is called an articulating. Some people may think of this as an old school, very much like an external frame pack. It does have some benefits. It's full wrap. There are no changes. It has a dual adjust top and bottom with this cam system. I think most people would find this quite fiddly at this point, and most people would prefer the standard forward pull that is on most packs. This is relatively hard to use. However, in the comfort realm, I will say that I think there is nothing that actually conforms and fits you better than a belt that has 2 direct straps, top and bottom, not any 4-to-1 or anything like that, but just direct. But this is kind of hard to use. Back to the framing. The frame is set wide, the load is spread fairly wide. This is what I would call more of an avoidance frame, where a lot of frames go into the lumbar. They really try to form to your back. They maybe need to be fitted to your back. This does some, but it's not as imperative. And by putting the load out further, you have essentially 3 load spots. You have your 2 iliacs. Those aren't always available if you have too much weight on you. If you have too much weight on you, those might not really function. Sorry to hear that. And then the lumbar. Now, Mchale does a unique setup on the lumbar. They have an internal pad here which pushes against this, which essentially keeps the full wrap belt contiguous through into your back. So I'll reduce this here and you can probably see it a little bit better. So it really keeps the belt contiguous. I'll get into another pack that uses similar type stuff in a little bit here, and some of the influences. So now let's go up to the top. Another thing that is unique to Mchales at this time were the bayonet systems. So it was essentially an adaptable frame height where you could have the pack be shorter for day or climbing or things like that where you wanted movement, and then you could have the pack be taller for carrying a load. Now remember, this pack was made in the 90s. I am going to say that I do believe most of the 90s packs had much better design fundamentals than most packs do today. That is just, I think at the time, Osprey, the American-made Ospreys, Dana, Mchale, they were all doing some really excellent work. But Most of them were very heavy as well, more around 6 pounds. They also were probably a little bit streamlined by what we think of today. So you want to knock this down. You can easily run this barely above your shoulder straps, or you can put the frame extensions in and go ahead and use it to a full height where it's a very supportive frame here. Next thing that makes this pack unique is this has what is known as the bypass harness. And Mchale, I think, articulated it. Dan Mchale, I think, articulated it fairly correctly when he said that it is a battle between tension here and tension up here. And full disclosure, on a backpack design I did a long time ago, I did not put much into the harness because I figured that the job of the harness was to essentially be at the right torso to allow you to get it centered on your hips correctly, and then you would take and lift up the harness from there. I was a little bit wrong because people do kind of like stuff riding on their shoulders, at least somewhat, so I had to make a nicer harness. Anyway, this has this setup down here and this here, so essentially what this does is this pulls this up and almost increases your torso height, and it does it really with one setup instead of a balance between your lower adjustment and your top adjustment. That has been adopted somewhat by some other brands now that the patent has run out. So I think there were 2 things in this pack that were patented and granted patents, utility patents. One was the bypass harness. Another was the bayonet. I believe Osprey adopted a version of this in their anti-gravity, but it looks like is a little bit better implementation, I would think, than the Mchale. Remember, this is a 90s pack. This probably goes 6-7 pounds. Also has some unique features like bottle pockets are much more modular, and they don't really fight with the pack bag. Some things like that. As I mentioned, it has the sit pad as well. Now, when you talk about that pack from a fundamental thing, what it does is the frame starts wide, really kind of in between your iliac and your lumbar. So you have those 3 points there. Also, probably people were a little bit thinner in the 90s as well. So the iliacs were a little more consistently reliable as a place. And you can see way back in early backpacks that a lot of backpack manufacturers were really trying to aim on the iliacs, like you see like the old Jansports that have the wraps and stuff like that. However, you have the frame, very direct load transfer right from the top of the frame right down to there. You have a full wrap belt. You have top and bottom tension. Those are all good fundamentals. Usability wise, probably not the preferred usability. I believe most people prefer a simple forward pull closure at this point. And there is a balance between usability. Now, as I mentioned, I believe Osprey has borrowed from that bypass harness in their approach on the anti-gravity. I think there may be another manufacturer or 2 out there that has done similar. There are several packs that have that more wider spread, sort of flat stay design. I believe there was a North Face from the 80s that had that. I've seen a couple other packs that were more similar in that frame design, but not all of them used 70-75, which, as you see, the yield strength is huge there. When they get into using more common aluminum, you see much more of like a taco. The frame can taco quite easily. So that is a consideration as well. Now, this pack here is a seat divide. Full disclosure, I actually designed the bulk of this pack in 2013, 2014 time frame. The frame is a very direct bolt-on. The difference, because this was made for being heavier load hauling, is that it used tubular aluminum. so it really stiffened up the frame. Although some of that flex can be an advantage because it does soften the harness. The seat side harness system is far different. This was a full wrap belt as well, but this was more of a top bottom to a single closure, so more like a 4-to-1. Probably people would consider that better usability. Seek eventually did add a lumbar pad option, but instead of putting it behind like the Mchale, it was a softer pad that wrapped over the front. A little bit easier there. Seek also did a frame height option as well, where you could add extra frame on top of it. It wasn't quite as slick as the Mchale, but it was lighter. I mean, this pack here is an under 3-pound pack. So as you can see, there is a substantial difference. And this pack was probably made 2020. There was a substantial difference in the weight and the capability. Like this one, the frame is just much more supportive. Although you could say that in that one, the harness and the 70-75 aluminum definitely give it some advantage in that. Anyway, I'm going to do a few more pack breakdowns and a few more pack deep dives. This is the first one. If you have comments, if you have packs that you would like to learn something about or really dive into, let me know in the comments. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. Thank you very much.